For one thing, Hollywood films rely on sets, actors, expensive film stock, and lush effects to recreate a story. Production value, coupled with the cultural saturation of trade gossip, help ensure a modicum of disbelief, thus reaffirming for the audience that no matter how moving, riveting, or terrifying a film may be, it is still only entertainment. Documentaries, however, rely on interviews, inferior equipment, and virtually no effects to document real events. Note 181. Consider Stephen Mamber's definition of cinema verite, which seems an almost exact description of how Navidson made his film. Cinema verite is a strict discipline only because it is in many ways so simple, so direct. The filmmaker attempts to eliminate as much as possible the barriers between subject and audience. These barriers are technical: large crews, studio sets, tripod-mounted equipment, special lights, costumes and makeup; procedural, scripting, acting, directing; and structural, standard editing devices, traditional forms of melodrama, suspense, etc. Cinema verite is a practical working method based upon a faith of unmanipulated reality, a refusal to tamper with life as it presents itself. Any kind of cinema is a process of selection, but there is, or should be, all the difference in the world between the cinema verite aesthetic and the methods of fictional and traditional documentary film. Stephen Mamber, Cinema Verite in America, Studies in Uncontrolled Documentary, Cambridge, Massachusetts, The MIT Press, 1974, page 4. Endnote 181. Audiences are not allowed the safety net of disbelief, and so must turn to more challenging mechanisms of interpretation, which, as is sometimes the case, may lead to denial and aversion. Note 182. Obviously, the tradition of documentary filmmaking is a long and valuable one, especially when considering those contributions made by Robert Flaherty, Herbert Klein. What follows is a list of filmmakers, sideways on page 139. This continues on page 141. Arthur Barron, Gerhard Schumann, Craig Gilbert, Garson Kanin, Sidney Myers, Vladislav Slezicki, Bruce Brown. Note 183. Horizontal and mirrored text on page 140. Without whom culture would not possess such works as Scott's Antarctic Expedition, The Memphis Belle, Gimme Shelter, Painter's Painting, How Life Begins. This list of films continues on page 140, 142, and 144, ending in note K on page 109, previously read. Endnote 183, endnote 182. Return to page 140. While in the past, live footage was limited to the aftermath, the oral histories given by survivors or photographs taken by pedestrians, these days the proliferation of affordable video cameras and tapes has created more of an opportunity for someone to record a plane wreck or bank robbery as it is actually taking place. Of course, no documentary is ever entirely absolved from at least the suspicion that the mise en scène may have been carefully designed, action staged, or lines written and rehearsed, much of which these days is openly carried out under the appellation of reenactment. By now it is common knowledge that Flaherty recreated certain scenes in Nanook for the camera. Similar accusations have been made against shows like America's Funniest Home Videos. For the most part, professionals in the field do their best to police, or at least critique, the latest films, well aware that to lose the public's trust would mean the death rattle for an already besieged art form. Currently, the greatest threat comes from the area of digital manipulation. Sideways text. In 1990, in the New York Times, Andy Grunberg wrote, regular text. In the future, readers of newspapers and magazines will probably view news pictures more as illustrations than as reportage, since they will be well aware that they can no longer distinguish between a genuine image and one that has been manipulated. Even if news photographers and editors resist the temptations of electronic manipulation, as they are likely to do, the credibility of all reproduced images will be diminished by a climate of reduced expectations. In short, photographs will not seem as real as they once did. Note 184. Andy Grunberg, Ask It No Questions. The Camera Can Lie. The New York Times, August 12, 1990, Section 2, 129. All of which reiterates in many ways what Marshall McLuhan already anticipated when he wrote, "To say the camera cannot lie is merely to underline the multiple deceits that are now practiced in its name." Also in 1990, Associated Press executive Vincent Alabiso acknowledged the power of digital technology and condemned its use to falsify images. The electronic darkroom is a highly sophisticated photo editing tool. It takes us out of a chemical darkroom where subtle printing techniques such as burning and dodging have long been accepted as journalistically sound. Today, these terms are replaced by image manipulation and enhancement. In a time when such broad terms could be misconstrued, we need to set limits and restate some basic tenets. The content of photographs will never be changed or manipulated in any way. A year later, the NPPA, National Press Photographers Association, also recognized the power of electronic imaging techniques. As journalists, we believe the guiding principle of our profession is accuracy. Therefore, we believe it is wrong to alter the content of a photograph in a way that deceives the public. As photojournalists, we have the responsibility to document society and to preserve its images as a matter of historical record. It is clear that the emerging electronic technologies provide new challenges to the integrity of photographic images. The technology enables the manipulation of the content of an image in such a way that the change is virtually undetectable. In light of this, we, the National Press Photographers Associations, reaffirm the basis of our ethics. Accurate representation is the benchmark of our profession. Note 185, see Chapter 20 in Howard Chapnick's Truth Needs No Ally, Inside Photojournalism, University of Missouri Press, 1994, endnote 185. Then, in 1992, MIT professor William J. Mitchell offered this powerful summation. Protagonists of the institutions of journalism, with their interest in being trusted, of the legal system, with their need for provably reliable evidence, and of science, with their foundational faith in the recording instrument, may well fight hard to maintain the hegemony of the standard photographic image. But others will see the emergence of digital imaging as a welcome opportunity to expose the aporias in photography's construction of the visual world, to deconstruct the very ideas of photographic objectivity and closure, and to resist what has become an increasingly sclerotic pictorial tradition. Note W. William J. Mitchell's The Reconfigured Eye, Visual Truth in the Post-Photographic Era, Cambridge, Massachusetts, The MIT Press, 1994, page 8, endnote W. Ironically, the very technology that instructs us to mistrust the image also creates the means by which to accredit it. As author Murphy Gruner once remarked, just as it is true with Chandler's Marlowe, the viewer is won over simply because the shirts are rumpled, the soles are worn, and there's that ever-present hat. These days, nothing deserves our faith less than the slick and expensive, which is how video and film technology comes to us, rumpled or slick. Rumpled technology, capital M for Marlowe, hails from Good Guys, Radio Shack, or Fry's Electronics. It is cheap, available, and very dangerous. One needs only to consider the George Holliday Rodney King video to recognize the power of such low-end technology. Furthermore, as the recording time for tapes and digital discs increases, as battery life is extended, and as camera size is reduced, the larger the window will grow for capturing events as they occur. Slick technology, capital S for slick, is the opposite, expensive, cumbersome, and time-consuming. But it too is also very powerful. Digital manipulation allows for the creation of almost anything the imagination can come up with, all in the safe confines of an editing suite, equipped with 24-hour catering and an on-site masseuse. Note 186. Murphy Gruner's Document Detectives, New York, Pantheon, 1995, page 37. Note 187. struck through text. One can imagine a group of documentary detectives whose sole purpose is to uphold truth and truth. Note, double downward arrow. Or TNT. Truth and truth therefore becoming another name for the nitrating of toluene, or C7H5N3O6, not to be confused with C16H10N2O2, in other words, one word, trinitrotoluene. TNT, note 188, which also stands for technological neural transmitters, TNT, note 189, or what, as Lude once pointed out, also means tits and tail, i.e. also explosive, i.e. orgasmic, i.e. a sudden procreating pun which turns everything into something entirely else, which now, as I catch up with myself, where I've gone and where I haven't gone and what I better get back to, may very well have not been a pun at all, but plain and simple just the bifurcation of truth, with an ampersand tossed in for unity. A sperm twixt another form of similar unity. And look, there's an echo at hand. The articulation of conflict may very well be a better thing upon which to stand. Truth and truth is all, after all, or not at all. In other words, just as Zampana wrote it. Note 196, page 149. 195, continued. Which, in case you didn't realize, has everything to do with the story of Connaught B.N.S. Cape, who observed 4 asses winnow the air. For, as we know, there can only be one conclusion, no matter the labor, the lasting trace, the letters, or even the faith. No daytime, no starlight, not even a flashlight to the rescue. Just, that's it. So long, folks. One grand kaplunk, even if Mr. Cape really did come across 4 donkeys winnowing the air with their hooves. Thoughts blazing through my mind while I was walking the aisles at the Virgin Megastore, trying to remember a tune to some words, changing my mind to open the door instead. Some door, I don't know which one either, except maybe one of the ones inside me. Which was when I found Haley, disturbed face, incredible body, only 18, smoking like a steel mill, breath like the homeless, but eyes bright and pure, and she had an incredible body, and I said hello, and on a whim invited her over to my place to listen to some of the CDs I just bought, convinced she declined, surprised when she accepted. So over she came, and we put on the music and smoked a bowl and called Pink Dot, though they didn't arrive with our sandwiches and beer until we were already out of our clothes and under the covers, and coming like Judgment Day, i.e. for the second time. And then we ate and drank, and Haley smiled, and her face seemed less disturbed, and her smile was naked and gentle and peaceful. And as I felt myself drift off next to her, I wanted her to fall asleep next to me. But Haley didn't understand, and for some reason, when I woke up a little later, she was already gone, leaving neither a note nor a number. A few days later, I heard her on KROQ's Love Line, this time drenched in purple rain, describing to Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla how this guy in a real stale studio with books and writing everywhere, and weird drawings all over his walls too, all in black. I couldn't understand any of it. Had dozed off, only to start screaming and yelling terrible things in his sleep, about blood and mutilations and other crazy beep, which had scared her. And had it been wrong of her to leave, even though when he'd been awake, he'd seemed all right? An ugly shiver ripped up my back then. All this time I believed the cavorting and drinking and sex had done away with that terrible onslaught of fear. Clearly I was wrong. I'd only pushed it off into another place. My stomach turned. Screaming things was bad enough, but the thought that I'd also frightened someone I felt only tenderness for made it far worse. Did I scream every night? What did I say? And why in the hell couldn't I remember any of it in the morning? I checked to make sure my door was locked, returned a second later to put on the chain. I need more locks. My heart started hammering. I retreated to the corner of my room, but that didn't help. Fuck. Wasn't helping either. Better go to the bathroom, try some water on the face, try anything. Only I couldn't budge. Something was approaching. I could hear it outside. I could feel the vibrations. It was about to splinter its way through the hall door, my door, walker in darkness, from whose face earth and heaven long ago fled. Then the walls crack, all my windows shatter, a terrible roar, more like a howl, more like a shriek. My eardrums strain and split. The chain snaps. I'm desperately trying to crawl away, but it's too late. Nothing can be done now. That awful stench returns, and with it comes a scene, filling my place, painting it all anew. But with what? And what kind of brushes are being used? What sort of paint? And why that smell? Oh no. How do I know this? I cannot know this. The floor beneath me fails into a void. Except before I fall, what's happening now only reverts to what was supposed to have happened, which in the end never happened at all. The walls have remained, the glass has held, and the only thing that vanished was my own horror, subsiding in that chaotic wake always left by even the most rational things. Here then was the darker side of whim. I tried to relax. I tried to forget. I imagined some world-weary travelers camped on the side of some desolate road in some desolate land, telling a story to allay their doubts, encircle their fears with distraction, laughter, and song, a collective illusion of vision spun upon their portable hearth of tinder and wood, their eyes gleaming with divine magic, born where perspective lines finally collude, or so they think. Except those stars are never born on such faraway horizons as that. The light, in fact, comes from their own gathering and their own conversation, surrounding and sustaining the fire they have built and kept alive through the night, until inevitably, come morning, cold and dull, the songs are all sung, the stories lost or taken, soup eaten, embers dark. Not even the seeds of one pun are left to capriciously turn the mind aside, and tropos is at the center of trope, and it means turn. Though here's a song they might have sung. Mad woman on another tour, everything she is she spits on the floor. An old man tells me she's sicker than the rest. God, I've never been afraid like this. Heart may still be the fire in hearth, but I'm suddenly too cold to continue, and besides, there's no hearth here anyway, and it's the end of June, Thursday, almost noon, and all the buttons on my corduroy coat are gone. I don't know why. I'm sorry, Haley. Note 197. Following the release of the first edition over the internet, several responses were received by email, including this one. I think Johnny was a little off here. I wanted to write and tell you about it. We actually had a pretty rad time, though his screams were really weird and definitely scarred me. He was very sweet and really gentle and kind of crude too, but we still had a lot of fun. It did hurt my feelings, the part about my breath. Tell him I've been brushing my teeth more and trying to quit smoking. But one part he didn't mention. He said the nicest things about my wrists. I was sorry to hear he disappeared. Do you know what happened to him? Haley, February 13th, 1999. Editors. Endnote 197. I don't know what to do. The locks may have held, the chain too, but my room still stinks of gore. A flood of entrails spread from wall to wall, the hacked remains of hooves and hands, matted hair and bone, used to paint the ceiling, drench the floor. The chopping must have gone on for days to leave only this. Not even the flies settle for long. Connaught BNS Cape has been murdered along with his donkeys, but nobody knows by whom. For as we know, there cannot be an escape. I am too far from here to know anything or anyone anymore. I don't even know myself. End note 196. Endnote 189. Another pun and another story altogether. Endnote 188. Return to page 144. TNT, telegraphing a weird coalition of sense. On one hand transcendent and lasting, and on the other violent and extremely flammable. Endnote double downward arrow. By guaranteeing the authenticity of all works, their seal of approval would create a sense of public faith which could only be maintained if said documentary detectives were as fierce as pit bulls and as scrupulous as saints. Of course, this is more the kind of thing a novelist or playwright would deal with, and as I am pointedly not a novelist or a playwright, I will leave that tale to someone else. End struck through text. Endnote 187. Endnote 186. As Grunberg, Alabiso, and Mitchell contend, this impressive ability to manipulate images must someday permanently deracinate film and video from its now sacrosanct position as eyewitness. The perversion of image will make the Rodney King video inadmissible in a court of law. Paragraph break. Incredible as it may seem, Los Angeles Mayor Bradley's statement, "Our eyes did not deceive us. We saw what we saw, and what we saw was a crime," will seem ludicrous. Truth will once again revert to the shady territories of the word and humanity's abilities to judge its peculiar modalities. Nor is this a particularly original prediction. Anything from Michael Crichton's Rising Sun to Delgado's Card Tricks or Lisa Mayne, Slit, Beta's Confession of a Porn Star delve into the increasingly protean nature of a digital universe. Paragraph break. In his article, True Grit, Anthony Lane at The New Yorker claims, "Grittiness is the most difficult element to construct and will always elude the finest studio magician. Grit, however, does not elude Navidson." Paragraph break. Consider the savage scene captured on grainy 16mm film of a tourist eaten alive by lions in a wildlife preserve in Angola, Traces of Death, and compare it to the ridiculous and costly comedy Eraser, in which several villains are dismembered by alligators. Note 190. Jennifer Kale told me she'd visited Zampano around 7 times. He liked me to teach him filmic words, film crit kind of stuff, straight out of Christian Metz and the rest of that crew. He also liked me to read him some of the jokes I'd gotten on the internet. Mostly, though, I just described movies I'd recently seen. Eraser was one of them. End note 190. William J. Mitchell offers an alternate description of grit when he highlights Barth's observation that reality incorporates seemingly functionless detail because it is there, to signal that this is indeed an unfiltered sample of the real. Note 191, previously read, which I will reiterate, Roland Barthes' The Reality Effect in French Literary Theory Today, ed. Svetan Todorov, Cambridge University Press, 1982, pages 11 to 17. End note 191. Note 192. William J. Mitchell's The Reconfigured Eye, Visual Truth in the Post-Photographic Era, page 27. End note 192. Kenneth Turan, however, disagrees with Lane's conclusion. Navidson has still relied on FX. Don't fool yourself into thinking any of this stuff's true. Grit's just grit, and the room stretching is all care of industrial light and magic. Ella Taylor, Charles Champlin, Todd McCarthy, Annette Insdorf, G.O. Pilfer, and Janet Maslin all sidestep the issue with a sentence or two. However, even serious aficionados of documentaries or live footage, despite expressing wonder over the numerous details suggesting the veracity of the Navidson record, cannot get past the absolute physical absurdity of the house. As Sonny Beauregard quipped, "Were it not for the fact that this is a supreme Gothic tale, we'd have bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker." Note 193, Sonny Beauregard's Worst of Times, The San Francisco Chronicle, July 4th, 1995, C7, column 2. Difficult to ignore here is the matter of that recent and most disturbing piece of work, La Belle Niçoise et le Beau Chien, As many already know, the film portrayed the murder of a little girl in such comic reality it was instantly hailed as the belle of the ball in the Palace of the Grotesque, receiving awards at Sundance and Cannes, earning international distribution deals, and enjoying the canonical company of David Lynch, Louis Buñuel, Hieronymus Bosch, Charles Baudelaire, and even the Marquis de Sade. Until, of course, it was discovered that there really was such a little Lithuanian girl, and she really was murdered, and by none other than the wealthy filmmaker himself. It was a slickly produced snuff film, sold as an art house flick. Emir Kusturica's Underground finally replaced Niçoise as the winner of the Cannes Palme d'Or, an equally absurd and terrifying film, though gratefully fictive, about Yugoslavia. The Navidson record looks like a gritty, shoestring documentary. La Belle Niçoise et Le Beau Chien looks like a lushly executed piece of cinema. Both pieces are similar in one way. What one could believe, one doubts. Niçoise, because one depends upon the moral sense of the filmmaker. The Navidson record, because one depends upon the moral sense of the world. Both are assumptions neither film deserves. As Murphy Gruner might have observed, rumpled versus slick. Your choice. End note 193. Perhaps the best argument for the authenticity of the Navidson record does not come from film critics, university scholars, or festival panel members, but rather from the IRS. Even a cursory glance at Will Navidson's tax statements, or for that matter Karen's, Tom's, or Billy Reston's, proves the impossibility of digital manipulation. Note 194. The records were made public in the Philip Newhart article, The House the IRS Didn't Build, published in Seattle Photo Zine, Volume 12, 118, pages 92 to 156. End note 194. They just never had enough money. Sonny Beauregard conservatively estimates the special effects in the Navidson record would cost a minimum of $6.5 million, taking into account the total received for the Guggenheim Fellowship, the NEA grant, everyone's credit limit on Visa, MasterCard, Amex, etc., not to mention savings and equity. Navidson comes up $5.5 million short. Beauregard again. Considering the cost of special effects these days, it is inconceivable how Navidson could have created his house. Strangely, then, the best argument for fact is the absolute unaffordability of fiction. Thus, it would appear, the ghost haunting the Navidson record, continually bashing against the door, is none other than the recurring threat of its own reality. Note 195. Despite claiming in Chapter 1 that the more interesting material dwells exclusively on the interpretation of events within the film, Zampano has still wandered into his own discussion of the antinomies of fact or fiction, representation or artifice, document or prank, within the Navidson record. Note 196, previously read. I have no idea whether it's on purpose or not. Sometimes I'm certain it is, other times I'm sure it's just one big fucking train wreck. End note 195. Eventually, Jed tries again to carry Wax toward what he hopes is home. He also attempts periodically to signal Navidson on the radio, though he never gets a response. Regrettably, very little footage exists from this part of the voyage. Battery levels are running low, and there is not much desire on Jed's part to exert any energy towards memorializing what seems more and more like a trek toward his own end. The penultimate clip finds Jed huddled next to Wax in a very small room. Wax is silent, Jed completely exhausted. It is remarkable how, faced with his own death, Jed still refuses to leave his friend. He tells the camera he will go no further, even though the growl seems to be closing in around them. In the final shot, Jed focuses the camera on the door. Something is on the other side, hammering against it, over and over again. Whatever comes for those who are never seen again has come from... Note, typo, should read, for. End note. Him. And Jed can do nothing but focus the camera on the hinges as the door slowly begins to give way. Note, right pointing arrow. No punctuation point should appear here. See also Saul Steinberg's The Labyrinth, New York, Harper and Brothers, 1960. Note K, previously read. Endnote, right pointing arrow. Bibliography. Architecture. Brand, Stewart. How Buildings Learn, What Happens After They're Built. New York Viking, 1994. Jordan R. Furno. A Concise History of Western Architecture. London, Thames and Hudson Limited, 1969. Kostov, Spiro. A History of Architecture, Settings and Rituals. Oxford, Oxford University Press, 1995. Potthorne, Herbert. Architectural Styles. An Historical Guide to World Design. New York, Facts on File Publications, 1982. Prevsner, Nikolaus. A History of Building Types. Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press, 1976. Prost, Antoine, and Gérard de Vincent, editors. A History of Private Life. Riddles of Identity in Modern Times. Trans, Arthur Goldhammer. Cambridge, The Belknap Press of Harvard University Press, 1991. Poussin Labelle, African Nomadic Architecture, Space, Place, and Gender. Smithsonian Institution Press, 1995. Travis, Jack, editor. African American Architecture in Current Practice. New York, Princeton Architectural Press, Incorporated, 1991. Watkin, David, A History of Western Architecture, 2nd edition. London, Lawrence King Publishing, 1996. Whiffen, Marcus, American Architecture Since 1780. Cambridge, The MIT Press, 1992. Wu, Nelson Icon, Chinese and Indian Architecture, The City of Man, The Mountain of God, and the Realm of the Immortals. New York, George Braziller, Incorporated, 1963. Films, too numerous to list here.